So I'm Peter Schwartz. I'm professor of medicine and bioethics at the IU School of Medicine, and I'm director of the IU Center for Bioethics. And we are joined here. This is when you boo. No, just kidding. We are joined here by Ken Goodman, who is emeritus professor of medicine and philosophy at the University of Miami, and he's former director of their institute there on bioethics and health policy, which was at the Miller School of Medicine at University of Miami. So, as you all know, IU and University of Miami are meeting in a national championship. That's right now in the national championship of bioethics. And there's also going to be a football game on Monday, is what I've heard. So, you can blame Ken for this. I blame Ken for most things, and I'll blame Ken for this, which is that when Miami made the playoffs, and my Notre Dame friends are going to remind us of how controversial that was. But Miami made it. Ken said, well, look, if IU and Miami meet in the championship game, we should hold a bioethics of sport session, and which sounded nice, but also unlikely. The chance of Miami making it past Ohio State, Georgia, Ole Miss. I mean, what's the chance? I was very confident about IU, but yeah, but here we are, and Ken, as usual, foretold the future better than I did. So, um, the reason I was reluctant is that I'm not a sports bioethicist. Even as Peg mentioned, there are people who really work hard and focus on sports. Ken nor I do that. But we are bioethicists, like others on this call, Eric, who I'll mention in a minute, who think about bioethics issues all the time. And many of the topics that come up in the area of sports are identifiable and certainly bioethics issues. And so perhaps we have something to say about them. Um, in addition, we will have no answers. As usual in a bioethics talk, this is the standard disclaimer before many discussions of bioethics that we don't have answers for many of the questions we'll ask. Our goal in bioethics, as in all of ethics, is to understand better the question, to think hard about right and wrong, about moral goodness and badness, and how to navigate those topics as we move forward. Here's how we'll proceed. I will ask Ken a question, and Ken will answer, and I will respond. Then Ken will ask me a question. I'll answer. He'll respond. As we talked about this week, I realize it's never going to be that organized. With Ken and me, I think it may resemble more a dinner between us at La Tub, which is a small outside restaurant in Hollywood. I believe it's in Hollywood, Florida, where we've had many a pleasant evening dinner. But I promise you we will finish in about 30 or 40 minutes. And we have broken down the topics into about three areas. We're going to try to make sure we cover them because I will be a timekeeper and we'll move on as needed. Also, we'll have the help of two ringers who have already spoken on this call. Eric Meslin, an old friend of Ken's and mine, and my old boss, the founding director of the IU Center for Bioethics, has offered to offer his thoughts and a question if one comes to him. And if I know Eric, one will, if not more. And Peg Brand, an old friend of the Center for Bioethics and of Eric's and mine, and who certainly knows more about sports ethics than maybe Ken, me, Eric combined. So we're happy to have these people. They're not on the poster, but okay, enough on the preliminaries. It's time to get ready to rumble, which I think is an NFL thing, not a college football thing. And we flipped a coin, and I won the toss, so I have chosen to receive. Ken, feel free to state the first question.
When I looked at the coin, Peter, though, it seemed to have two heads.
Yeah, that's the usual ethics thing. There are two heads. Maybe there are two tails, no heads.
Well, thank you very much for that very kind introduction and for the background. It means a lot. What I think we are signaling is that while there's a great deal of attention focused on this sporting event, it is from two universities that actually have wonderful departments well, colleges of arts and science, schools of medicine, schools of law, and that we are first and foremostly educators, including of student athletes. So, Peter, since you've won the toss, let's sort of let me ask you a broad question, given the overarching theme here about sport and health. Are sports good for your health? When they're not, what do we say about that? How are we to make those trade-offs? Thank you.
That's a great question, Ken. I was not very expecting that one. No, so thank you. It's a great question, and again, it relates to how sports and bioethics overlap, right? Because When we think of sports, we think of health, exercise, right? We exercise for our health. Sports is a wonderful part of a healthy lifestyle. Physically, mentally as well, right? We learn sportsmanship and we encourage our kids to play for their physical and their mental and personal growth. But of course, there's also tremendous injury in sport. Even amateur sport, as a middle-aged tennis player, I will tell you, right, my main goal getting off the court is not to win these days. It is to not be injured. So we are all injured. And my friends who I play tennis with, I was struck about a year ago how many of the ones who played serious sports in high school and college, unlike me, how many of them were injured and were dealing with long-term injuries that really impeded their life and their tennis game. So I was struck by that. There's even some interesting research that school-based serious athletes have better cardiovascular health and worse orthopedic health in their life overall in a study. Um, we'll talk more about the issues of injury in health, but in sports. But of course, I'll just begin the topic. I suspect Ken will add to it that there's an epidemic of injury in sport now too, and especially in the organized sports that we watch. I'm not even getting into football concussions yet. We will, I'm sure. But the way students are trained and the way the expectations and the focusing on a single sport and the way in which sports are being run year round now. Obviously, the injuries students have. The striking statistic for me was that Tommy John surgery is often a surgery these young pitchers have in high school or at latest college, and they have again if they go into professional. So that is, of course, brand new. Tommy John surgery was an amazing thought back when it was something professional pitchers were undergoing, and now it's kids. So that is concerning, and it's concerning about health. And again, it's a key bioethics topic. Ken, do you wish to respond?
I'm getting the signal from Peg. I get a follow-up question here. And that question would be, at what point are we taking adequate steps to reduce injuries? I mean, no one's seriously going to advocate on behalf of more injuries, especially for young athletes, given the consequences you just identified. But also our institutions have gone, I believe, to great length to try and mitigate those injuries. And so the question is, are they adequate, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's a great question, which is no. I'm going to say no. I think that our obligation, as you said at the beginning, Ken, very lovely, that we're educators and supporters of young people, and seeing so much injury, we know there's something wrong. And I'll bounce back to you then, Ken. The question, which actually I'm borrowing it from Peg, to be honest, is does the risk of serious injury make coaches and parents complicit when it happens in children, right? Children aren't deciding for themselves. We don't expect them or hold them to that standard, but we put them in situations where they will be injured, where some will be injured. Is there a moral obligation on the parents and the coaches to avoid that?
So that's a very good question. And the easy answer is sure, if it's your kid, you're going to make sure that she's not injured, certainly seriously, doing something that you had billed as good for your health, good for your character, good for learning how to work with others on a team, learning how to win and lose graciously, etc. But there is no risk-free sport. I think we would all agree. I remember, Eric, I think you were on the chess team, weren't you, Eric? I mean, you can even get repetitive motion disorder from the challenge that we face is our precautions, is the mitigation, is the prophylaxis adequate to the task? And it's ultimately an empirical question. I don't know how good a job we're doing. I hypothesize we could all be doing a better job. I'm afraid you might be right, actually, that it's just not good enough because, well, for a bunch of reasons. One of which is we love these games so much. Two, this will be related. This is an ethical issue that's not necessarily related to health, but sports remain lucrative. And when our institution, it makes it a challenge at the institutional level. If you're a parent, well, if you're a parent and you hope your kid is going into a sport that will be lucrative for the family, I would say that's an even greater challenge that we face. And that raises, as we know, a lot of really difficult issues related to socioeconomic status and other considerations. Let's not be coy. It also raises issues of race. And so I know physicians, as I'm sure you do, who will say, I believe that what my institution is doing provides adequate precautions against young people being hurt. Others will say, I'd never let my child play football. And that's a difficult judgment that you make based on your assessment of those risks. Look, we're not going to stop college football. And I think most of us would regard that as a good thing. We like the games. College football especially, is one of the greatest spectator sports in the United States of America. We, therefore, you could argue, have a pretty straightforward obligation to make it as safe as possible and to improve that now.
I'm struck by what you said about parents and kids playing football. I did not let my kids play football. I know people who do. And, in medicine, again, just to bring it back to bioethics, again, we've decided, I will tell everybody, not to stay too close to bioethics, but when possible, we'll bring it back to bioethics. We think a lot about parents and their kids in the context of medical treatment and how medical treatment and involving children, for example, in research that puts them at risk is not acceptable unless there's benefit that's truly necessary or desirable, and parents are asked to make that choice. And the things you've raised, Ken, I think do raise a very serious concern about the willingness to let your child play sports. And we do focus on football, and perhaps rightfully so, but as you've pointed out, there are more sports than that. Even chess. I would not, no, no, I would let my child play chess, and everything has risk. But it kind of gets to another question, which maybe it's unfair to me to ask you another one, but are some sports just too dangerous to allow?
Mm. The reason why this is being recorded, right? The reason why
We can pause
Indiana
it if you
has,
need us to. It's okay.
the reason why Indiana has such a good team, and the reason why Miami has such a good team, they didn't pick up college football during orientation. These young men have been playing this sport for at least a decade, probably longer. And so the challenge for a parent is, well, if you know your child's going to be injured, then it's all by definition too dangerous to allow. What you do is you understand the kinds of injuries that are possible. An argument, by the way, for more and better data. What are the risks of? And then you have a whole bunch of maladies and injuries of different kinds of sports, and what's being done to minimize them. Look, the history of this. You mentioned head injury. I'm hoping I'm not the only one who remembers the helmets that they had 50 years ago, which at one point they made larger based on the lack of physics knowledge that suggested the bigger the helmet is, the more your head's protected. Well, that was a mistake because one, a bigger helmet means you're going to get hit in the head more often. And two, it increases the risk of rotational injuries. You don't just get a concussion by getting a head-on injury. You can have a concussion because your head twisted quickly.
Yeah.
So it was a good faith but failed attempt to reduce dangerousness. Is football too dangerous to allow? I don't think anyone would argue that now. Some of us have real concerns about, well, I don't know, sports where people hit each other, which many of us have trouble understanding in the first place. So the answer is, in principle, yes. The answer is some sports are too dangerous to allow. But I'm not sure we'd be able to agree which ones they are.
And I see your hand. I promise we'll get to you before we go on to our next section. It's fine. I understand it may be hard to wait. Let me just say one thing to you about this, Ken, and something we talked about before. The way we build this initially was going to be ethics of sport and research on sport. And I took that out because we didn't have so much we wanted to say about that. But actually, I want to throw something in here. You raised the issue of helmets and what is safe. And what you describe of putting helmets on children and young adults and older adults to protect them, and then finding out later that it wasn't a good idea. It encouraged actually concussion and encouraged repeated small concussions. It encouraged ways of hitting each other that you don't do in rugby, right? I've seen this data that rugby is safer because they're not wearing helmets, or certain things are. That suggests we need to do better research, right? And there is a great bioethics issue, right? Doing research on children where you randomize them to a helmet or not. Can you imagine an IRB ever approving that? But really, there is a place that should give us some pause, that an IRB won't approve that, again, due to these concerns about harming children. But we can go ahead and put helmets on children or not put them on without knowing whether it's beneficial or not, and just sort of guessing and finding out a generation later, oh, well, guess that didn't work out so well. Ken's not so smart anymore.
Mind you, other research that has been done. has been significant. It was what we do to prophylax against or mitigate injuries.
Yeah.
There are scientists in the United States doing research on different composites and gels that if you were to put it in a football helmet, when there's a point of impact, the gel expands to absorb the force of the blow.
Genius.
That's biomedical research, if you ask me, and I think that that kind of research, one, it's occurring. Two, it needs to get supported, and three, we need to find out what we can learn from it.
Okay, we are changing gears, but Ed, you get the final comment on sports and health. We will or will not respond to a question. I'm going to warn you, if we have to go on, we will hold it for the end. But please go ahead, Ed.
Well, thanks, Peter. I was going to say just a couple of things. The first of which is that, life is intrinsically risk laden, and mitigating risk is something that as parents, we have to make our own decisions. So it's very difficult to insert that into a bioethical argument that, one shoe fits all. That one's hard.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to try.
I love it because you're appealing to a great bioethics principle of autonomy.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
but
Yeah.
but it is parental autonomy, and sometimes we do things to protect our children because other parents will not. So there's reasonable point of view. But the other comment I want to make is, and it's about the mechanics of concussion in football. And there's a great deal of misunderstanding that somehow that because the helmet prevents point trauma, that is, the presence of trauma to a particular focused location within the head or neck, that the helmet is beneficial. But the majority, the good data that's been done on, in dummies and gel models and so forth, frankly, says that's all baloney. The thing about football injuries to the head and neck are basically acceleration, deceleration injuries, and there isn't a helmet right now that will help us with that. So,
Yeah, take them off.
Tough. My
Okay,
answer is tough.
second topic.
It's your turn. Whose turn is it, Peter?
I think it is. I think I don't know. If you wish to go, you feel free.
You
I
read
think
the question,
that
so
I knew it was going to turn into La Tub instead of La Organization. So I can ask you a question on money in sports, or you can ask me. We're on our second topic, which is money in sports, which is the least bioethics oriented, but we're going to hit that because we've already touched on money. As you've said, Ken, we can't think about sports and even child sports, even adult, pediatric sports, without thinking of the promise of money, and then later, of course, the big money of Monday's game.
All right.
What do you think?
Well framed. And by the way, Ed's point is a very important one. I mean, you can get a concussion by being struck in the chest, and I think that was what he was pointing out. Which all of which is, I think, opportunities for great and exciting science at universities that have great medical schools.
Yeah.
So Peter, so tell me your thoughts about the commodification of this national pastime to the point that we can link injuries in this, because if you're going to make a few $1,000,000 while you're a college student, then that might provide some measure of comfort about risking injuries, more or less severe. So what are your thoughts about money in sport, whether it is a recognition of, well, that's the way the world is, we commodify everything, or that's actually a bridge too far because we actually did prize amateur athleticism?
Yeah. So I'll take a question in two ways. I'm going to run as we call it in bioethics, the play, which is called the why play, where I'll split your question into two parts. That's the why play. I play it from the line of scrimmage, and maybe it's my special teams. So professional sports and academic, right, and amateur sports. Professional sports, we actually use, as you know, Ken, in our teaching, in ethics classes, and even in bioethics, as I'm transitioning into thinking about healthcare financing, right? How do we think about the ethics of payment to anybody? And one of the great examples is, how do you think of the ethics to Wilt Chamberlain? He makes so much money because he is unusual and unusually good at his sport, and people want to pay him. How can you question how much money he makes? And then again, we can't do it in our 10 minutes we have for money in sports, but we think on philosophical constructs that make sense of that and say, no, a person can make too much money, even in a free market, and therefore they will be taxed to help support the least well off in a system that might be approved by people in a veil of ignorance in a Rawlsian account. So there's all kinds of questions about paying professional sports, and I think we all recoil at times at the amount of money professional athletes make. We also cannot call it free market. There, of course, is monopolistic practice in every professional sports, and that is what generates such high salaries. If you could have as many professional baseball teams as possible, there would be no way any individual could make the money that people make in a limited market. And so these are hard, hard questions that, of course, as I promised at the beginning, I have no answers for. Do athletes make too much? They seem like they do, but the idea of a fair wage is hard. Getting to amateur sports, of course, everything's much harder. We've seen in our lifetime, for those of us who are not very young on this call, the change from athletes at school making nothing or almost nothing to making a ton. So again, to use some stats that I got from my helpful questioner, Peg Brand, what, 11.6 million for Signetti, 8.3 million for Cristobal, Fernando Mendoza, 2.5 million in NIL, and for Carson Beck, 3.1, or I might have reversed those with performance bonuses maybe. Is that too much money? And for an athlete, they were getting free education, we thought. But then we realized, boy, everybody's making money except for the athlete, and something has to be done. Something has been done. I will tell you, and I'm not sure it's helpful. I think, of course, athletes need to make money in college. If they are going to be part of such a money-making enterprise, it's just not right for everybody to make money except for the student. Is this too much money? Seems like too much to me, but boy, I don't know how to do it. And my friends here from the NCAA, I think we might even have somebody. I hear you having trouble there. Ken first, and then Eric. Oh, Eric took down his hand. Ken, do you wish to respond to my rambling why formation answer?
I'm afraid so. Uh, there's not an academic in the country who has not marveled at our institutions' inclination, willingness, ardor to produce resources for sport. I would think that titans in the field, like, I don't know, Meslin and Schwartz, ought to make at least as much as any of those
Oh,
quarterbacks.
now we're talking, first of
Right.
all. We agree.
Well, okay, we get it's different. We also knew there was some sense of unfairness. Remember, you framed this, the talking about values, as we do in ethics, is really important. And we value different things in different ways. And we realized there was something of an injustice with these young people putting themselves at risk and not being compensated while our institutions were doing quite well. And so that led to the NIL, name, image, likeness agreements. We're gonna start paying these children money to play football. Did we do the right thing? Was that the best solution? Were there other ways? And the answer is probably there were better solutions, but this was not going to wait for us to come up with it. We needed to do something, and our bold new experiments sometimes need to be revised in bold ways. It's an open question and partly an empirical question. What I worry about, and I think you do too, is these college students are now moving back and forth among universities the way pro players are. Who's going to give you the best deal? And we're bidding against each other, our universities are. For college students, I'm that fills me with some disquiet. Be clear, we're here because we actually like sport. We're here because we like football. We're here because we think this is important. On the other hand, the way it is conducted is grist for our various mills.
Eric, go please. Eric, if you wish to ask again, I will use the same rule with you. I can't promise you an answer if you're asking a question, but please.
It's a comment, so it doesn't require an answer other than that's a very good point, and I agree. This is fascinating. I didn't know what was going to be discussed today, and I had my list, my guessing list, my bingo card of what I thought we would be talking about, and we got to one of them, which is the money thing. I want to just flag two things.
Flag.
I want to flag two things. Thing one was we went just a moment ago very quickly between athletes getting paid. That's a really challenging thing for reasons that probably go back to what's an amateur and what's a professional. But Peter just started with the salary item of two football coaches. And my understanding, and I did play college sports, and it wasn't chess. My understanding is that in some studies, the number one paid
Eric, curling doesn't
profession.
count as a college sport. Just, curling does not count, as you know.
This is getting like ridiculous. We'll talk later about my college
It
sport
was
career and
volleyball.
how it
I
connected
know
to
it was
three
volleyball.
injuries
I know it was volleyball, but you're
and
from
connected to
Canada.
three injuries. That's point one.
Continue, Eric.
But here's the thing. In some studies, the number one publicly paid individual in a state is a coach.
Yes.
Indiana.
That's bizarre. I don't care if it was 30%. It's not a teacher, it's not even a physician, let alone a police officer or whatever it might be. So when the salary topic is raised, it has to be across the entire board and not just the current flavor of should students be paid? Yes, they should. No, they shouldn't. It's not fair. It isn't fair. I think it's actually a fascinating commentary on the value that institutions, and I know I'm cutting close to the bone here, place if they can afford, if some institution unnamed can afford to pay a coach millions of dollars,
Well,
why can't it continue to hire FTEs to teach bioethics, for goodness sakes?
well, I use making money on this, so that's okay. Let's hold it there. Great comment, Ed.
Quick comment. We need to distinguish financial reimbursement for athletes from salary versus incentives and attractions to recruit. Peter made the point that we have a limited marketplace. That's true, and that would favor the recruitment model. But the question also is, are they being paid for sustaining risk?
Right.
So
I can't answer those. We have to do one more topic in the money aspect before we let things get away from ourselves. And I will ask Ken this question. Ken, when is it morally acceptable to let people bet on sports? Because betting isn't a money group. I think we have to touch on betting. We're talking about the players making money and the coaches making money. And now the spectators are making money or losing money. And that's, again, a change we're seeing in our own lifetime that we did not have, at least out in the open, before. Although we all know the NCAA bracket was a great betting moment for, office pools, all the law-abiding citizens, doing office pools for betting. Is betting okay, Ken? Is it ever okay?
I bet Eric, you'd ask that question. By the way, just parenthetically, Ed's comment's a good one. What we do when we're at our best here is we make distinctions between and among things, and Ed's exactly right. We need to make sure that if we wanted to be how should we say that if we want to be comprehensive in our analysis, the distinctions that Ed drew are important ones, and I want to acknowledge that. Um, to the extent that there is a health issue here, I don't know of anybody personally, but I know there are a lot of people who have a behavioral malady related to gambling. And we know it's also very often among young people, sometimes college students, and the availability to do it online without the kind of constraints that there used to be has, of course, led to more problems with that kind of thing. So that's one point, and I worry about that, and I think that there are ways that we could impose more nimble or smarter controls, if you will. There's other risk though in betting, and that is that it risks engendering distrust in the performance of the athletes. I think it's comparatively rare, but once someone says, "Hang on," I think it was your example, why did so and so miss that free throw? Or not swing on that beautiful pitch or whatever, then if there's discussion in the ethosphere about gambling, about the stakes of gambling, about winning and losing and so forth, then it undermines trust in the game. The value of sport, which I think is a thread you and I want to be bright throughout this entire conversation, is we've been doing this playing sport and betting on it, by the way, for thousands of years. It's part of our and many other cultures. If you look at the Olympics and the tradition of the Olympics, it is a celebration of humans being able to compete against each other in a way that shows respect and deference and a way to do so in a way that's not vulgar. When as soon as you start betting on it, I forget who said this now. I don't know if anybody here. Golf is a game with which I have limited familiarity, but I am familiar with the phrase that if we were to start playing a few tomorrow, for example, Meslin's going to say, "Hey, Ken, how about we make this a little more interesting?" Which is a code word for let's bet on our own performance. Right. So the inclination is there. There's probably some gene that codes for taking chances like that. Maybe it's the risk or thrill taking preference gene, but it is risky. I am not of the view that you could say it's morally unacceptable until a certain threshold is crossed. And I'm not sure what that threshold is. But look, Ed, Peg, let's make this a regular event. Our teams happen to be here. Wouldn't it be cool if the NCAA had an ethics event in conjunction with every championship game? That would be a way to continue to raise these questions. So yeah, betting is okay if it's trivial. I'm in the office pool. It's de minimis. On the other hand, it's easy for it to create a problem. And we are really good at taking something that was innocuous at face value, enlarging it, tripling it, weaponizing it, and now we're concerned about corruption of the game. So does that answer your question, Peter? Is it morally acceptable? Sometimes.
Excellent. And I feel bad too. I actually owe Ed a comment too. Maybe he wants to say something about this. I like the fact you brought in Ed's comment. Salary versus bonus, right? To be honest, I hear what you're saying, Ed, that you should keep those distinct. But I personally, and maybe you'll help me, but maybe it's just hard. I don't know which one is worse. I mean, I like the idea of earning your performance enhancement. On the other hand, like Ken said, that's encouraging people to play hurt or to cheat. Maybe salary is the way to go. But as Ken's saying, as soon as we get money involved, it is involved. It can't be completely taken out, but there are such dangers here, including, like Ken said, the basketball player who misses the free throw at the end of the game and now will no longer go on social media, right? He has to go on social media to build up his NIL, but he will not go on because after he misses that free throw, he's getting death threats saying, "Who was paying you? And you made me lose a lot of money. And goddamn you, I'm coming for your family. And I know where they live." How can we live with a sporting world that has that happen? Now, you might say, well, things happen anyway, but boy, that's on us. And it's a real concern. Although, again, like you're saying, Ken, there's no easy answer. So we got Ed first and then Eric. All people whose names start with E get to speak. Ed.
Let me insert one more complicating issue. If we go back to the ancients, Aristotelian concepts of what function sports plays within society. That is, it is a metaphor for the violence of warfare. If we start to insert those kinds of concepts, then the risks to person and risks to community become tolerable because we're not overtly killing anyone. We say we're doing this instead. So at some point, the threats of violence, the threats of retribution start to make sense because those are behaviors that we accept within the frame of warfare.
Excellent. I love it. That's a great comment. I do. I didn't think of that and think it was a replacement. Otherwise, IU would be killing the University of Miami actually physically instead of just beating them in football. It's a good point. Okay, sorry, Ed.
Well, behind you, is that a team or is that an army? I can't tell.
Yeah, it's true. They are carrying flags. They are running and they are screaming. It's a great analogy, Ed. I'm glad you reminded us of it. Eric.
And speaking of sport and rugby. By the way, I hope you're telling that I'm a man of many hats. And first person who knows what this hat is, I will buy a beer the next time I see them.
Ah,
Okay, that's your chance. I'll put it back on again. That wasn't my reason for putting my hand up. What I liked about Ed's comment was it elided over to sort of a broader philosophical question of what society values. And this is a massive question. It's not we can cherry pick the betting topic and we can decide should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame or should he not be, and should Barry Bonds' record stand because he was on steroids, which is a form of cheating that is not the same thing as betting. I don't know if steroids was on your bingo card, it's on mine. Maybe it'll come up in the next little while.
if
But
we ever get to the third topic, you will
the
hear.
concept of cheating is it goes both ways or many ways. One is me, the one who wants to do something as an athlete so that I can get an advantage, so that I could benefit others later in life. I cheat so that I can get a scholarship, so that I can look after my family. Look, when in my as a this is a 18-second story. When I was a teaching assistant at Georgetown, one of my students was Patrick Ewing, the basketball player, a great basketball player who was um, sort of vilified because he was uncomfortable in front of the media and he was a very large player. And he took my philosophy class. And Peter knows the story. I won't repeat the whole story. But Patrick was a diligent athlete, took every class, was a solid B student, worked because he knew he was a symbol of the team and all that went with it. One of only probably 12 at that time, 12 or 15 African Americans on the entire Georgetown campus, and he was the shining example. There's another guy whose name I won't mention, not because it would be rude, but because you've never heard of him. Also on the same Georgetown basketball team, who never wrote an exam, submitted a paper, nothing. And I was in the uncomfortable position of, as a TA, of having to fail him. Failure meant that he lost his scholarship. Failure meant that he lost his income. Now, he wasn't cheating. He was, forgive the pun, gaming the system. He assumed that he's an athlete and he'll get special treatment and they'll overlook other things. So it's part of what we permit, what we encourage, and what we really support as a society. And I think these examples of whether it's betting or paying too much or too little are sort of features of the system, not bugs, because if we didn't like them, we would literally eliminate them, but we don't.
Excellent. We have to hit our final topic. Thank you, Eric. That story reminds us again. I think again we were talking about whether it's possible to incorporate academics and athletics at the college levels. We know in Europe, I think I know this. Eric will correct me. He's more of a citizen of the world than I am. That high school sports are separate from high school in a way that it's hard to imagine in the U.S. Okay, our last topic, Ken, whose turn is it? Do I receive or do you?
Mm.
I think I will choose to kick off and you will receive. Um, our last topic is enhancement and the issues of health and enhancement that we have been dancing around and touching on, but let's take them on straight on. And so I'm going to ask, are enhancements ever appropriate in sport? And if so, what are your issues? Are there important issues with them?
Wonderful question and well put. Look, well, I regard, and I think everyone is diligent exercise as a form of enhancement, right? We want to prepare ourselves to perform better in the sport we're playing. There are certain kinds of enhancements, however, which underscore it's at least an intuition. I think it's a lot clearer than that, that certain kinds of enhancements, certain things are not available to everybody. When you use them, constitute a form of cheating. And if you're cheating, why then if you've won unfairly. And that undermines what I think Ed was referring to earlier, namely that part of what we want about sport is that it's an honest game. The coin at the beginning was a fair coin, and the competition is based entirely on our preparation, our ability, our skill, our planning, whatever. And that if I found some magical drug that causes me to kick punts or field goals longer, why then that gaming of the system, I think we'd all would tend to say is not going to be permissible. Now that's led to great efforts by people in sports around the world to try and identify tools that will enhance performance, ideally without detection. There's nothing ethically interesting there. I think that most of us regard that as a form of deception that undermines the point of the sport. But that, of course, is going to be too quick too, because if you live in was it high altitude and you train there, you're going to end up being a better runner than those of us in Miami or at sea level, right? Does that make it unfair because you were able to train in Denver and we say, well, that's not inherently unavailable. I could have gone to Denver, I suppose, if I wanted to. So on the question of enhancement, if it's a biological modification that is more than what you would do in the normal course of your daily activities, with a footnote there, because it turns out that antihistamines apparently have some salutary effect on certain kinds of performance, which is why anti-doping control is a part of a lot of sports around the world. They're looking for particularly forbidden agents. Well, we're going to debate what those agents are, what the dose that constitutes cheating is, and so forth. And that might be the very best we can do. Let's do more research, find out about ways in which people might try and find how to game the system, and then prophylax against that.
So I will take, sorry, Ed, I'm going to take my right of return. Ken just went 3 and out, I think, so I get to get the ball. So although it was a good 3, it wasn't just not 10 yards. And he can go on again if he wants.
Your
But anyway.
wicket is sticky.
So I like how you took the simpler and more sort of most straightforward part of enhancement, which is if some do it and they do it secretly, it's just cheating, and that's easy ethically because we're looking for a fair game. We're all have the same chance. But of course, we bioethicists, when we think about things like genetic enhancement, then think, oh, well, what if you just make it available to everybody then, right? 10,000 calorie diets, bariatric chambers, testosterone, steroids of the sort that will make you perform better. Everybody has it. It's part of the fair competition. And now when those things sound off to you and unacceptable, as they do to me, even if because Peter, steroids are not safe. So cheating, that takes some off the table. Injury, like steroids cause injury, so take those off the table. Safe enhancements, where does that stop? Is there any limit? I try not to look at chat because it gets me out of the conversation, but Joe Kotva, one of our faculty here at the center, put it into chat. This comment that within medicine, we think of enhancement as being funny. It's a different kind of thing than training. I think Eric or Ken said, we train, right? We train ourselves. We run, we eat healthily, we practice our sport. Those are in, but changing our genes might seem different. And that's a thorny one. We've been having that discussion in bioethics about how genetic enhancement differs from medicine, if at all, for now, generations. So I'll just flag that as an issue for the enhancement. I see that Ed and Eric, again, our friends, are going to go ahead and follow up here, and then Peg will get her chance because now we are getting late. Unless Ken, do you have more to say was I unfair? Do you want to speak, or do you want to let it go to the folk?
Just 14 seconds in which we say that this discussion is doing what Ed counseled. We are making distinctions. You mentioned Tommy John surgery. Suppose there was some football sports expert who says, I can actually surgically give you a nice muscle transplant. Or that probably would have been absurd some time ago.
Oh,
what is the limit on what we expect our colleagues in the health professions to do that might cross over into cheating? Or that might have collateral damage to these players that's just not worth it.
And as Sandel mentions in a great article on this topic, as soon as you develop a treatment, it will be recognized if there's any chance to use it as enhancement. So the early studies on mice to treat muscular dystrophy with genetic changes to make their muscles stronger immediately attracted the attention of athletes, saying, I don't have muscular dystrophy, but boy, I'd like that gene. Uh, Again, I see the back and forth. Okay,
Let me
Eric, yeah.
let me insert a novel idea. When I used to present this to my students and ask for a general consensus, ultimately we finally got to the point where no one was willing to limit enhancements. If we define the strive for excellence as having no limits,
Fascinating.
then we eliminate the notion of ethical standing of a particular treatment or enhancement, because we keep meticulous records in sports. We are constantly trying to improve those records. Do people really care about whether it's an enhanced performance or not?
Good question. Eric.
Two quickies. I love this, and I wish we had more. Thanks, guys. If we don't get to tell you how much fun this was, because they didn't know what it would be like, and it's been way above even a high bar of expectation. I want to pick up on something that Ed said just now, so I'm glad he preceded me. And that is, I think that this, as we all know from 25, 35, 45 years of bioethics, genetics, with its ugly side, eugenics, and its disgusting side, almost enhancement for vanity purposes, because there are a variety of extremes. Forgive the sort of mixed metaphor, but the goalposts have been moving quite a lot in the last 15 or 20 years in enhancement. And they've been moving not just in enhancement, but the very first topic you raised, Peter, about injury and recovery from. I used to teach way back in the day that Seattle, Washington had more MRI machines than all of Canada, my home country, where there is a culture of sport that includes fighting, by the way. And that was a sort of a charming comment about access to available resources, but also, wait a minute, it's not that Canada can't afford to have MRIs, it's that they've chosen not to have 45 MRIs in every hospital like the US does. It's an exaggeration. That we thought that was kind of funny back in the day and a simple example. And yet now, when one of those players gets injured in a game, he's rushed to the local hospital and in 5 minutes has an MRI. And I'm not this isn't Canada versus the US and access to available resources. So I actually want to throw a little ringer into this, and that's, I don't know the difference between enhancement as a biolog. Peter's the expert in philosophy of medicine, philosophy of science, whether we're talking only about the enhancement of the physical body, including the mental body, or are we talking about the enhancement of the conditions under which individuals can excel? I mean, I was raised in a lovely family. I was raised with great opportunities. We all know that argument. So I don't know that enhancement is a good enough term to cover this cluster of topics. I'm not criticizing your choice. I think it's a great topic. But it's almost, and yes, it is. We shouldn't be allowed to. No, it isn't. You can't lengthen your leg. Leg lengthening is one line that's too far. But some antihistamine, that's okay.
So,
all of our IUPOI athletes who train in Eldoret, should they be unable to train in Eldoret at altitude? Anyway, thank you.
Good questions. Perhaps some will answer them. Peg, you are invited to offer a comment or question, or you can pass, and then we'll move on to. I see a lot of chats, which I'd like to call onto the floor. But Peg, please.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Ken, and Ed and Eric. And I would like to be the 5% female gender representative here, because studies show from USC Center for Feminist Studies that in sports coverage, ESPN, you name it, we are covered 5% of the time. So thank you for including me. Can I make two comments, quick comments?
Yes, I'm counting though. We're doing better on percentages here, but go ahead, Ken.
I am one of the five. Anyway, number one, athlete autonomy is a concept in philosophy of sport and worth examining. And recent studies even coming, there's so many more philosophers of sport in Europe and especially Scandinavian countries. Studies are looking at parental attitudes because if a child as young as 5 can play in our Pop Warner football leagues to prepare them at age 9 or 10 to tackle, then it's the parents who are giving permission. And what scholars are starting to look at is studies of parents and parental attitudes, issues of identity. You didn't even touch on the bingo of trans athletes. We didn't even go there yet. But it's the parents giving permission. It's the parents encouraging the identity of formation of an athlete and the values of competition, but also all those risks of harm. And so athlete autonomy is transferred over to parents, and there's a lot of work being done on that, I would say, in sports ethics right now. Secondly, since we are all lovers of football, that's probably why we're on this Zoom. The philosophers I read now, even middle-aged men who are talking about the dangers and risks of especially college and pro football, will never limit the game. They will never, ever say, we should get rid of football, as someone already said here. Rather, we should take enhanced steps towards mitigating injury or better protocol. It'd be great to have an NCAA panel with their physician who's in charge of concussion protocol, for instance. That would be fun. And it's only the rare philosopher, and I'm going to drop this at the end, who will say, as fans, as rabid, money-paying, thousands of dollars a seat now for Monday's game fans, you are complicit in the CTE data we now have on football players. And when you drop that on students, they all go, well, not me. Don't blame me for that. But that's another emerging, shall I say, theme in the literature coming out, that we who love it for all the right reasons are also complicit in what's happening. But thank you, guys. Let's do it again.
Wow, outstanding comments, and the issue of complicity, I think, is enormous, as we all, if we participate and we go.
Peter, can I jump and just tell Peg how much I like the comment, and I'm assuming that embedded in it is the complicity goes horizontally and vertically. It's not just, the paying publics and the others. It's, university leadership and mayors and governors and prime ministers and presidents, and, well, maybe not presidents, but there's plenty of complicity to go around. If you don't even have to look all that far.
It's this enormous money generating subculture worldwide. I mean, you watch the Olympics as well, maybe not as dangerous, but the prevalence of sport is so pervasive and so historically old. And if you read history of sport, for instance, Heather Reed, who's written many, many books on this, incredible scholar who works with the IOC. We're now at universities here at the University of Oregon working with the IOC. Sport is attributed to the rise of democracy and the rise of Western philosophy, that they come along together because you are deposing kings who think they can just win by being king. It becomes more egalitarian, more democratic. And when you link those three things together in ancient Greece and then study the Olympics, it really enriches, I think, the contemporary discussion.
Wow,
Thank you.
And if I might, Peg, your point, as it becomes more egalitarian, then we're addressing a problem that we knew on its face was fundamentally unfair. As long as men's sports have been privileged over women's, then we have done something that's also not very ethically interesting. It was on its face wrong. And at my institution and yours, goodness knows it's not fast enough or big enough, but we know that we're doing a better job now trying to attend to women's sports as we are to men. And whether there should be, Dr. Schwartz, a transgender league, well, we'll leave that up to you to answer now.
Hey, so actually, I want to do one thing before Eric and Ed come back in. We have a whole bunch of people, including some people who've been chatting in the chat, who I want to allow time. Thanks, Peg, for those excellent comments and challenges. I've noticed Jane Hartzog, one of our faculty at the center, has been posting, and Joe Kodfa. Do you wish to come in, Jane or Joe? Oh, Jane, come on in. What do you want to have us think about?
Well, I do just want to say that we've been mostly talking about football here, and I understand why. But I think that it's important to recognize the way that does leave women out of the sports or out of the conversation. As you know, I was a college swimmer for 4 years and continued swimming for years and years and years after that. And particularly in the conversation around money, what I see, and not to put too fine a point on it, is that we are paying men enormous amounts of money to play sports that men like to watch. And we're doing it under the sort of imprimatur of an academic pseudo program, and it often crowds out actual academic programs. And certainly women are not experiencing those benefits in the same way that male athletes are. So that's my one little thought there that I wanted to throw in.
No, it's really, really important. And something we haven't addressed yet. I'm glad it was raised by both Peg and you, that the issue of, again, progress, as Ken said, progress, perhaps, Title 10, perhaps now we're worried about backward progress. But still a long way to go. Others who haven't spoken yet, who wish to offer their comments? Then I will give the closing comments to Ed and Eric, but watch the clock, guys. You got a minute and a half each. So
Let us retreat to the notion that if sports are a metaphor for warfare, that all of the other observations fit. Most nations send their men to war. Most nations pay their men to fight, and so on and so forth. It's the competitive nature of me against you, and how we express that is how we, as a democratic society, as Peg has pointed out, have decided to do it in a less than lethal fashion.
well, what's wonderful about your comment, Ed, and the previous comments by Jane and Peg are that that's exactly how sport can then help the rest of society. Because if you can get over the stereotype that women don't wish to go mano a mano and engage in warfare, if you can get over that, sport can help you get over that. That
Yes.
women
Yes.
are like men and men are like women in competing. And perhaps there were stereotypes that said, oh, well, women wouldn't want to do that. Who would want to bang into somebody? Well, you know what? Plenty of women do. And sport allows us to see that in a context where we're not actually asking people to kill each other. So
One word reply, Peter: testosterone. It drives so much.
that's true too. Eric.
So, women was on my bingo card, and I'm really glad that Peg and Jane raised this. I wanted to maybe hope that we could end on something positive, which is, I hate the idea that bioethics is always about finding flaws, finding problems, and showing how good we are at problematizing. There have been some efforts to redress some of these issues of injustice. The Women's Professional Hockey League that Haley Wickenheiser has begun has been not just a cool thing to have, but a phenomenal activity. Caitlin Clark's ascendance as a model of almost a ridiculously amazing model after only a couple of years out of college, turning the WNBA into far more must-see television than the boring, ridiculous men's NBA. And Mia Hamm's early work, with the U.S. soccer program that brought soccer to the level it should be. I think there are at least, it's a pretty thick, using a hockey metaphor, the ice is still tilted quite a lot in the direction of men. There's no doubt. Which is an embarrassment. I played college volleyball for many years, and the women's game was much more exciting than the men's game, and still is. So I think there are some ideas that we've learned largely around collective bargaining, largely around the role of agents and marketing, and the ROI on sport that was, back to our old topic of money ruling it. But there are some signs, hopeful little signs that I I hope we can remember.
So I'm going to take Eric's challenge very seriously at finishing on a positive note. I have some positive things to say, and perhaps Ken does too, and we can finish up. I want to say that part of my motivation for doing this has been recognition as I get older, as well as throughout my life, of the positive part of sport, right? This is what we're talking about. We're talking about problems, as Eric says, we're good at identifying problems, but it's because of a love of the positive thing that sport does. To be bringing people together, creating memories, bringing families together, creating some of the greatest experiences of our lives in a fantasy world, right? When I stand, when I fall to my knees in the stands, when Miles Turner hits his 35.3 to put them up 35 points above the Bucks. I mean, what a crazy moment. What Peter being the silliest person he's ever been, but also one of my greatest memories, sitting with on my knees on the ground next to my son in the stands in the playoffs this year. And sports gives us that, and it will give us that Monday. But how do we, do that best? Think about the deep issues behind it. I think we had a great conversation today. I thank everybody for being here, and thank Ken for making this happen. Ken,
The
final.
positive point, Peter, that we're all agreeing on is we're here because our universities are going to be playing in the largest sporting event in the history of civilization in a few days. I'm actually out of town, and the local news is all over Indianapolis and Miami. This matters in ways that suggest that what we've done today here, Peter, is a reminder that in the academy, great universities are able to discuss the issues of our time, the origin of sport, its function in society, the ways in which it's corrupted. That you and I have done this, Peter, and thank you for your hospitality, is good, positive, and noteworthy. And that I think is something that we can take some comfort in.